Howdy, Trey McGathan here, and today I'm going to go through every single selection I made for the mock Seattle expansion draft. You can do this whole thing on capfriendly.com, and in case you didn't know, I recently got a 44-inch 4K screen TV, so that is what I'm going to be using as my monitor for my rig now. It's pretty damn sweet if you ask me. So, for Anaheim, it was pretty simple. Most of their options were pretty garbage, so I just picked the best available player, which was Hayden Fleury. Arizona was a little bit more difficult because they're in a cap crunch, and they still managed to keep relatively everyone that's necessary to the core, so I took Antti Raanta, who was the best available player. That cap hit's pretty big, but considering he's a pending unrestricted free agent, I don't really care. Bruins, it was pretty obvious. I went with Trent Frederic. I mean, you'd be pretty stupid not to. Let me look at these options. You either pick a pending unrestricted free agent or you pick Trent Frederic. So I picked Frederic. For Buffalo, again, there was nobody good on the available, so I just took Anders Bjork. Fuck it. Calgary, pretty much the same thing. There wasn't anyone that was worth a damn, so I just took the guy with the highest salary in order to get some money off the table, and that was Chris Tanev. Carolina, this was really fun because there's a bunch of excellent choices, and I decided to go with Alex Nedeljkovic because I think he's going to be a goalie of the future, and when you can get a franchise goalie, you don't hesitate because you can always find another cool defenseman, but finding that franchise goaltender, that's you have to take the goalie in that instance. Chicago, there wasn't a whole lot on the table, so I just took Ryan Carpenter. Fuck it. Colorado, this one was really fun. I initially wanted to take a forward, and I was thinking Brandon Saad, but he's a pending UFA, and I wanted to get some contracts on the table, so I instead took Devin Tays. And, you know, considering that he's one of the low-key better defensemen of the league, getting him at $4.1 million until 2024 was a no-brainer. Columbus, they didn't have a whole lot on the table, so I just decided to pick Eric Robinson. Just your average depth winger, really. For Dallas, I wanted to take Cogliano, but I didn't have the cap space for it, so I ended up settling with Andrej Sekera. Detroit, I decided to take Richard Panik because, again, I didn't really see many good options, so I figured, okay, well, if I'm the GM and I want some extra draft capital, I'd be willing to take Panik off your charts in order for some extra picks. So, you know, if Steve Yzerman is listening, you may want to do that come June. With Edmonton, this is pretty obvious. You take James Neal because he's your power play quarterback of the future, and because you could probably get an extra pick out of Edmonton if you did decided to take that much money off of their table. Florida, well, this was a pretty obvious pick as well. Noel Acciari. He's a fantastic winger. He could easily fit into any top six in the league, and it was a treat to have him on that 2019 run. LA Kings, Ole Mata, because he has a shit ton of money on salary, and I want some of LA's draft capital. Minnesota, Matt Dumba, obviously. That's just a no-brainer. Montreal, I took Jake Allen because, again, he's a fantastic stopgap goaltender, and there wasn't a whole lot of options with forwards and defensemen. I needed an extra goalie, so I figured, why the hell not? Nashville. I initially wanted to take a defenseman, but then I realized that there weren't a whole lot of good options here, so I decided to take Rocco Grimaldi. Just your typical winger, really nothing too special about him. You can stick him in the middle six, be fine. New Jersey, this one's really easy. You take PK Subban in exchange for a shit ton of draft picks, and then you buy him out and see if you can get him to sign at a much lower cap hit. New York, again, it's the same thing with New Jersey. You just take Andrew Ladd, get as many picks as you can out of it, and buy him out once the season begins. It's a little more complicated with him because he's on contract until 2023, so if you do buy him out, he'll be on your books for 4 years, but again, I still have cap room, and it's a really, really good pick if you want extra draft picks. Rangers, Kevin Rooney, because no one else is worth a damn. Ottawa, again, there's nobody worth a damn, so I just decided to take Marcus Högberg. That's one of those guys that you're probably going to end up cutting or demoting to the minors. There's just nobody worth a damn on here. Philly, I thought about this one long and hard, and after some consideration, I went from JVR to Shane Gostisbehere, because the thing with Gostisbehere is he's on contract for a couple more years, he's making a shit ton of money, and multiple times this year, the Flyers decided to make him a healthy scratch, so I'm sure that the Flyers wouldn't mind me taking him, and when you put him on a team that's got the special teams and team defense that I've got here, he could thrive. Pittsburgh, I took Jared McCann because despite what I thought would happen, there really aren't a whole lot of good picks. I thought about taking Casey DeSmith, but at this point I'd already picked 5 goalies, so I figured, I'm better off taking a forward. So I took McCann, because, you know, taking McCarter's stupid. He's way too old. Jose Sharks redeemed Shimmick because nobody else was worth a damn. You may as well bolster that defense, and that's what I decided to do with this pick. The Blues, I took Sammy Blaze because, again, I thought there'd be a lot more options to pick, but at this time I was running out of cap space and needed to take a cheaper forward, so I took Blaze. Tampa, Patrick Maroon, it's not even a debate, because if you take on Tyler Johnson, you go over the cap. And, well, I mean, you could technically make a trade for like Andrew Ladd for Tyler Johnson, but that would just be really, really poor cap management. So I decided to take Patrick Maroon because he's a useful forward that can throw a punch every now and then. With Toronto, I initially thought about taking Wayne Simmons, but then I realized, oh yeah, he's a bit on the older side and is probably going to collapse. So instead, I took Jack Campbell, because he's a relatively cheap goalie option that just broke a record. May as well see what he's got in the tank. Vancouver, I decided to take Zach McEwen, because he's a really cheap center depth option that should be on the bottom 6 and produce, unlike Vancouver's bottom 6. Washington, I decided to take Trevor Van Riemsdyk because he's just quite young enough to still be useful on that top 4. Granted, I think he'd be on the second pairing, but at this point I really needed to get more defensemen, and he's a relatively cheap option that's proven to be pretty decent throughout most of his career. And then finally, with Winnipeg, I decided to take Nathan Beaulieu because there's not much on the table and I was running out of cap room at this point, so I just took the cheapest defenseman available. That was decent. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at our roster. Alright, here we are. Seattle Kraken have a projected cap hit of $71,364,892 with a projected $10.135 million in cap space. On the forwards, you've got James Neal, Andrew Ladd, Jared McCann, Richard Panik, Rocco Grimaldi, Noel Achari, Anders Bjork, Sammy Blaze, Ryan Carpenter, Eric Robinson, Trent Frederick, Patrick Maroon, Zach McEwen, and Kevin Rooney. On your defense, you've got PK Subban, Matt Dumba, Chris Tanev, Shane Gostisbehere, Devin Tays, Oli Mata, Radim Simic, Andre Shakira, Hayden Fleury, and Nathan Beaulieu, and Trevor Van Riemsdyk. So, a lot of defensive depth. And then with your goaltenders, Jake Allen, Antti Ranta, Jack Campbell, Alex Nedeljkovic, and Marcus Hoberg. So, needless to say, this would be a team defense and power play sort of team. At even strength, I don't think they'd be very strong, but it's a really decent looking squad. And what amazes me is that I only have to sign, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4 free agents. And I don't think any of those 4 free agents would combine ask for $10.135 million. So I'm grand. This team would probably make the playoffs in a regular format, but they wouldn't be as dominant as Vegas was. And part of that is just from the circumstances of COVID, but yeah, it's a very decent team, and I'm proud that I drafted what I did. What do you guys think? Leave a comment below. Be sure to like this video, and if you enjoy content like this, be sure to subscribe. My name is Trey McGathan, and I will be seeing you soon.